GoldenEye on the N64 blew everyone away with its impressive quality. From the gameplay to the level design, this was a groundbreaking title for console first-person shooters, along with setting a high standard for future Bond games to follow. EA ended up acquiring the license to the franchise, and as such, a new team got to work on another Bond title. This time it was going to be a sequel to the film Tomorrow Never Dies. The game was going to be very different compared to GoldenEye, with a change in perspective from first-person to third-person. Other action elements were going to be included, like swimming, driving, and skiing. I generally find Tomorrow Never Dies to be an underrated Bond film that is not brought up enough, and as a kid, I loved playing this game. I would turn on the cheat codes and mess around in each of the levels. When revisiting GoldenEye, I found many aspects about the game to be timeless. For Tomorrow Never Dies, it had a bunch of bad decisions and design that hurt the experience. Join me as we take a look back at Tomorrow Never Dies. Following the success of GoldenEye on the N64, the James Bond IP was a hot item within the games industry. EA acquired the license, and with Black Ops Entertainment at the ready to make a new game, but now it was going to be exclusively for the PlayStation. Originally, this game was going to take place after the events of Tomorrow Never Dies and be a sequel to that film. This would allow the team to be more free and creative on how they tackle their game, as they didn't need to explicitly follow the events of the film. At some point during the development process, a build for their game was play-tested by focus groups. This resulted in the development team receiving a lot of messages about how members of these groups wanted to experience many of the events from the film. Following this feedback, the scope of the project changed from being a sequel where the developer had more freedom in their approach to their game, to now needing to change directions during the development into something that the game was originally not intended to be. Here is an early commercial that has Q providing information about the game, along with showing aspects about the game that were never made into the final release, like swimming.
Hello there. Look, I'm just testing this highly explosive top-secret Tomorrow Never Dies video game for PlayStation. The game starts where Tomorrow Never Dies ends and challenges you to think, act, and behave, well, possibly not behave, like James Bond. I must say, it's lethal, and it's going to explode in the stores this autumn.
Tomorrow Never Dies was going to be a big departure from GoldenEye. One of the biggest changes involved the changing in the camera perspective. Where GoldenEye was a first-person shooter, Tomorrow Never Dies was going to be played from the third-person perspective. Black Ops Entertainment had a lot of pressure on them to deliver a quality Bond experience, especially after GoldenEye, along with this being the very first Bond game on the PS1. The gameplay was going to focus on third-person action sequences, with some levels dedicated to skiing and driving Bond's car. Since the developers were now making a more movie tie-in type game rather than a sequel, they used this as an opportunity to expand some of the areas of the game that were going to feature parts of the movie so that it wasn't just a one-for-one experience. The team felt like the skiing areas of the game fit into the different aspects of the film that were elaborated on for the game. For example, the opening part in the movie is set in a winter location. Tomorrow Never Dies the movie has an impressive action sequence that featured Bond's car, and the developers wanted to provide something like that to the players. To stay in line with the fun gadgets that Bond used in the films, the game wanted to provide some of those options to the player with exploding cufflinks along with other gadgets. One interesting aspect about the game is that it was going to have a section dedicated to Wei Lin. She gets many good action moments from the film, and the developers wanted to highlight her abilities in the game. During development, the game was intended to have multiplayer options as well. This was going to be a two-player head-to-head multiplayer with characters from the film. Black Ops Entertainment had a lot of pressure on them to make a solid follow-up to GoldenEye, along with a good entry for the Bond franchise on the PS1. The original concept for the game seemed more interesting than the game that we ended up getting, since the developers potentially had more freedom to tackle the story and game with it being a sequel to the film. When the game changed its scope to now focus on the events from the film, this must have been a hard thing to accomplish while the game was already past pre-production. Either way, the developers seemed to be focused on providing a variety of different action sequences to capture scenes from the film and provide that authentic Bond experience, and now from a new perspective. Retrospective. In November 1999, Tomorrow Never Dies was released to the world.
Ever wonder what it's like to be 007? Now you know. Be Bond on PlayStation Game Console.
Tomorrow Never Dies is a third-person shooter that covers the events from the film with some extra areas thrown in. When it comes to the shooting, the action mostly relies on an auto-aim system, with an option to go into first-person to fine-tune your aim for more precise shots. This is particularly useful in going for those headshots. This game has many issues, and while some can be excused because of its age, a lot of it comes down to bad design and potentially rush from the change in scope during the development. Tomorrow Never Dies is a clunky and cumbersome game to control, and all of this makes for a frustrating experience from start to finish. The introduction of Tomorrow Never Dies does not start off on the right foot. You will notice right away that controlling Bond is very clunky. The left stick is used for moving forward along with going back, and you can turn by moving the left stick to the left or right. This is a very clunky movement system for a third-person shooter focused on fast action. You will find yourself getting easily hung up on different things in the environment as you try to move around. You will easily get hung up on corners as well. This movement system makes it feel like you are controlling a drugged-up Bond as you miss grabbing items that you are trying to grab because you are fighting the controls every step of the way. The shooting relies on an auto-aim system. The problem with the auto-aim is how inconsistent it is. Generally when you tag an enemy you will hit them, but there are plenty of times where you are locked onto an enemy and you cannot hit them at all. If an enemy has waist-high cover, you will mostly miss. The game doesn't really give you any indication that you are missing or hitting your enemy at many times. This brings up another issue. You have a life bar that shows you your health and body armor. When you are getting shot at, the game doesn't provide you with any indicators on the direction of those shots. So in some of the bigger areas you will be taking damage, but you won't know from where. Sometimes you can see the bullets coming in at you, and other times you cannot. The game is really inconsistent on what information it provides to the player through the gameplay, and many times you will lose a lot of health and not really know because of the lack of quick information to the player. This is all stuff you will see within the first area of the game, and it doesn't get any better when you move forward. Before I continue with the bad, let me elaborate on some of the other aspects as well. Most of the action consists of shooting sections. You have a decent variety of weapons to use, like an assault rifle, a few pistols, snipers, and a few others. The arsenal is pretty weak here. The weapon sounds are pretty good, and the impact is decent when you are up close to get some of the good death animations. You have the option to do a stealth takedown, but it can be really hard to line it up right, so it's best to just shoot your enemies. There are a few gadgets to use as well, and one item in the second level where you can shoot mines and blow up large boxes and enemies. Other forms of gameplay are two ski sections, with the first one being decent and the second one being annoying because of some instant death moments and more enemies. You can punch and fight with your skis, but it's very clunky. Then you have one level with the Bond car. This actually controls fine, but the action is pretty boring as you are blowing up a line of cars as they hit you with mines. There is a short part where you get to go into a plane and shoot at some targets, and then some of the missions have some cool kills inspired by moments from the film. The health system is made up of medkits and body armor, and the player has a certain amount of lives until they need to restart the entire mission over again. And that's about it. I really loved this game when I was very young. I would put in all the cheat codes and have a lot of fun with it. I was hoping this was going to be a fun game to return back to, but sadly it does not hold up at all. And honestly, it wasn't a very good game for its time either. There are some unintentional silly moments in the cutscenes along with some bad voice acting, and this is pretty funny and adds some entertainment value.
Ah, Satoshi Isagura. Seems you and Carve have been quite busy making headlines lately.
I presume you are referring to the nerve gas attack, Mr.
Bond. James Bond. I wondered what it would feel like if I ever saw you again. Now I know.
That's for walking out on me. Well, I feel much better.
The biggest issue I have with the game comes down to how it controls, but there are other issues present as well. Besides the lacking damage indicators so you can properly tell if you are being shot at, You can get stun locked almost every single time you are hit, so you need to wait for Bond to complete an animation before you can do anything. There are a few boss fights throughout the game, and they are not very good. They are just bullet spongy enemies and can be rather boring encounters. Or you can have one that just gets stuck running into you, making the fight really quick. A big missed opportunity is how you get to play as Wei Lin for one level. She controls just like Bond, and this was a missed opportunity to do something cool for her level. Then there's just moments where the design is just bad. In the final level, they put an enemy in front of a computer that, if destroyed, will cause you to instantly fail the level. You can easily shoot this computer with this enemy standing right in front of it. Why make this computer destructible at all? Another missed opportunity is how the game uses the sticky mines. I love how you can use them to blow up things and create new paths, but it's only used once and then never again. I understand that this is an older title, and my first recommendation if this came out today would be to have a cover system, but what I think would be a more realistic improvement for this game would be to overall have more refined controls and aiming, along with adding in a dodge roll. The auto aiming has many issues like I said before, and I can't stand how sometimes the game will not target the enemy that is right in front of you and opt to target someone who is far away. Tomorrow Never Dies feels like a mixed bag of bad design and a rushed development. Considering that this was supposed to be a sequel to the film and then changed during the development process, part of me wonders if this is what actually hurt the final game. Then again, the camera control, aiming, and movement probably would have been the same no matter what, and all these issues probably would have been present either way. Since I spent most of this section talking about how I do not like this game, I do want to end this section on a high note. The best part about the game is the soundtrack. Most of the tunes are catchy adaptations of the Bond theme, or music that fits right in with a Bond film. I absolutely love the soundtrack. The music was composed by Tommy Tallarico, and he did a fantastic job with this one, and it's the best part about this game. Here are a few tracks from the game. Tomorrow Never Dies for the PS1 is a bad game to an underrated film. I feel like a lot of what hurt this game were the changes made during the development along with the controls. The original concept for the game sounded very interesting, with it being intended as a sequel. This would allow players to enjoy a brand new Bond experience rather than just focusing on trying to hit the action moments from the film. Either way, the controls were definitely one of the biggest issues with this game, and that would have been present in either of the versions. Controlling Bond is clunky, and it's a situation of fighting the controls to play the game. It is not a smooth experience and hurts the gameplay. I understand that this game is old, but there are still games from that time period that control much better than this, which is why a lot of this game's problems comes down to design. I really like the idea of including a level where you play as Wei Lin, but it didn't have anything interesting or new mechanically while controlling her. This was a good opportunity to play as a Bond girl who can actually throw down with the rest of them, but it felt very uninspired here. I appreciate how the developers tried to add variety through skiing and driving, but both of these areas felt half-baked and tacked on to the entire experience. This entire game feels unrefined and lacking in many areas, and I think that was from the development. It felt rushed and lacking in polish. I can easily recommend watching the film that this game is based on, but unless you are a die-hard fan that wants to experience all of Bond's history, this is not a game that I would recommend you play. There is some charm in turning on the cheats and messing around along with a great soundtrack, but the game itself is not very good. Thank you very much for watching.